Hi everybody and welcome to the Helen Winder Show. I'm Helen Winder and my lovely guest today is Sophie Bennett, the publishing princess, who also has an amazing book called Money Bondage, which was Amazon's #1 bestseller for 8 months. Hello Sophie, how are you?
Hello, Helen. I'm good, thank you. On fire here in Gloucestershire.
Wonderful, that's what I like to hear. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've come round into the world of books after a very roundabout route of looking for something that really lit my fire. And, you know, like a lot of things, I think you see the nose, everybody else can see the nose on your face, but you can't. And bizarrely, after writing the book, it's been such an incredible journey. There's been people from all over the world been contacting me about it, and it's been out for a little while now, and it's just quietly been selling itself, and it's been immensely popular with women who it was actually written for ladies. But actually a lot of guys are picking it up too. I think it might be the red stilettos and the handcuffs on the front cover that's tempting them in. But they love it.
That's the main thing.
So, I mean, I started off, Helen, as a business writer, and as a kid, my dad was a journalist, so I've always been surrounded by books, and I remember being taught to touch type when I was about 8, and I thought it was all pretty pointless. I could not see what my dad was doing. He used to, if you can picture it, he'd sit me down at the desk at home and tie a tea towel across my hands, and it was one of those big old-fashioned typewriters. It was an old clunky mechanical one that had been thrown out by the, they were thrown out by the Liverpool Echo when they moved to electric typewriters. And so we had one at home, and I had a chart of where the letters were on my left-hand side of the desk, and I wasn't allowed to look at my hands because they were covered with a dishcloth. And then I was only allowed to look at the paper and not make any mistakes. And back then, it's a long time ago, you know, that was nearly 40 years ago. It was 40 years ago. And I didn't think I would ever need to do that. I had no intention, even then, of becoming a secretary. I had some very weird and wonderful ideas as a child. But can you imagine now how being able to do 120 odd words a minute has been useful to me in life? Now we're in an age of everything's on computer. And bizarrely, I've actually moved beyond that. Most of the time now, I actually dictate into my Mac. Word recognition is amazing. But what a skill to my dad to have had the foresight to teach me that. And then, of course, teach me how to write, because he used to help me structure my stories and my essays at school. So that training's been in me from the beginning, I guess.
It's funny, isn't it, how, you know, as a child, it can influence so much what we do moving forward. And sometimes we have little diversions along the way where we try little things and maybe just, you know, test the water, but we do end up coming back to what we were sort of doing when we were little.
We do. It sort of seems to be a destiny. And I had a very major diversion for a long time. For almost 15 years, I was a professional rider. That was my other passion, still is. My other passion is horses. So that was a very odd diversion, I guess, for a girl from a very meagre start in life up in Liverpool. You know, I was a city dweller, and I ended up in professional horse sport. But the strange thing about that was, within a few years, I became a coach. In some ways, I guess I've always been a coach for something. And I got into NLP from a sports psychology perspective. And it absolutely fascinated me. And I realized very early on that link that NLP makes about performance and the words that we use in our heads and the thoughts that we have that affect our ability to be the best at what we are. once I came out of the horses, I got injured, and I was 30, and I hadn't made the British team, which was my ambition. I got close, but I didn't quite make it. Then I took those skills with me that I'd developed, the coaching skills that I'd developed about how people interpret things in their minds and grasp concepts, which is really what coaching is all about.
Yeah.
Helping people find their own inner calling, if you like, and then guide them in a structured way to get what they want. And I did it on horseback, and then I moved back into the writing, and then got some formal training as a result of the job that I had. Yeah, an entrepreneur. I had a job for about 2 years. But it was wonderful. Completely changed the direction of my journey, and I'll be forever grateful. It's one of the best things I did was to take an entrepreneur's break, as we call it, for a couple of years, and actually go into the security of an environment where suddenly my training was paid for the first time in my life. And I got taught some very concrete skills to add on to the things that came quite naturally to me. That was amazing.
It is quite interesting, isn't it? Our journeys, and it's fascinating looking back to see what it is we did and what we learned, and the breaks that we took, or didn't take, and where those ended up. So the book, I mean, Money Bondage, it's quite an interesting title, but tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, the book came about because as a professional rider with not very much money, in a sport where the best horses trade hands for millions of pounds, I'd always felt very chained down by a lack of finance. I've never had a major sponsor. I've always had to bootstrap it, everything I've done. And so when suddenly, after a few years doing other entrepreneurial pursuits, I was into property, my writing allowed me to create the seed capital to create a property portfolio. And so I suddenly came into quite a lot of money, and I had this big lump of cash in the bank, and for the first time in my life I owned my house, I owned my car, I got rid of all my debts, and I realized just how much that lack of money had really shaped my life, sometimes in a very positive way actually, made me very resourceful. But on the other hand, how when you've got financial concerns, and I've taken a lot of risk on the property side as well, how it actually it can absorb you and drain you in a way that can be quite difficult to see clearly when you're in that place and you're chained down by that stress. And it was a book I sort of had to write. I had to get it off my chest, because there's a mental journey around going from really difficult financial circumstances. And when I came out of the horses, I was £68,000 in debt. I had no qualifications. I had no job at that point. I didn't own any property. I was living in a rented flat and behind on my rent. And one particular day, if you'd have been there, you'd have heard this knock at the door, and it was a bailiff on the other side coming to take my car away. And my car was my lifeblood. Without my car, I couldn't earn anything to even try and keep up. And so the huge difference between that day and being on a cross-channel ferry and having a cheque in the bank that was, almost 7 figures, was so dramatic. I felt I wanted to chart that journey, that mental journey for other people, about how your belief systems have to change, about what you're capable of, about the hang-ups around money you're brought up with, and about the fantastic things you can achieve when you get your head round yourself, when you start to be able to take control of some of these involuntary beliefs that, quite frankly, they're just culturally embedded. They don't serve us. So basically that's what the book was about. And I think because I wrote it, I did have some writing training. I had a lot of writing training, in fact, but I'd never written a book of that type. It just took off. And people said to me it was because it had a very conversational tone, or that there's some stylistic elements. Yes, but I think it was because it was just a true story, and I really put a lot of care into thinking back through that journey and structuring those thoughts in a way that other people could grasp. So the book really just asks the reader a lot of questions in a very structured way, and then gives evidence to blow any negative beliefs out of the water, and then asks them to go into their own experience and find their own evidence to blow their own beliefs out of the water.
Yes.
So that's the essence of the book, and some of the feedback's been incredible.
I've just been earlier on. Yeah, I was reading some of the feedback on the on Amazon, and it's great. It's obviously really, what's the word? It's really sort of pulled on people's strings and got them thinking, and obviously helped them turn things around as well, which is really important, because yes, our relationship with ourselves and our thoughts does impact who we are externally and what we attract.
Absolutely. And the strange thing is that after I wrote the book, I had this weird sensation that I'd written the wrong book. I hadn't, of course. I've written the perfect book at the perfect time for me and for the readers who have read it and picked it up and run with the content and changed their lives because of it. I've had emails, people saying they've paid their mortgages off 10 years early, or they've restructured their life. I had one lady left her job and started to follow her passion. It was really scary stuff. We have an enormous responsibility when any of us write a book, because that responsibility, you never know what people are going to do with that content. And thankfully, all the stories I've heard that have come back to me have been positive ones. But when I said I thought for a little while I'd written the wrong book, it was because the irony is I don't care that much about money. So I wrote a book about money, and that's what people were asking me to speak about.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to realize that actually what I really care about is the transfer of knowledge.
Yeah.
The book was just a vehicle for the transfer of knowledge. Money just happened to be my personal experience that went into that particular book. However, what's really fascinating for me is how you structure, how you get stuff out of your head and get it into the world through a book.
Yeah.
And it's been the most amazing promotional tool, because without it, I wouldn't be on this show. I've been on national radio and national newspapers and in magazines and asked to speak at amazing places and met some truly incredible people, including some of my sort of heroes, if you like.
Yeah.
So the whole book thing has sort of pulled me back in. And then one morning I literally had a light bulb moment. I'm sure you can relate to this. Maybe when you decided to do this show, where you just think, hey, I've just got to do this.
Yeah.
And it was realizing that my passion was actually writing books, not just because writing books can actually be quite an isolating experience.
Yes.
It's actually helping other people write their books. Because, I was training business writers to write persuasive content back in the late 90s. I was organizing complex information for intranets back in the early 2000s. All this stuff has led up to this point. So there's some amazing stuff. I'm launching something soon with a small group to get their business books written. And really that's where it just all comes together for me, is that how do you title a book so that the right audience finds you?
Yeah.
That's a great start. So if anybody's looking for some tips, if they're thinking about writing a book, would that be useful, Helen, do you think?
I think it would, absolutely, because I know myself. I have a book that I have started writing. A few, obviously, little events along the way have slightly delayed it, but actually they will add to other chapters. So those tips on how to do it and so on would be fantastic, definitely, yeah.
Would you like my 5-step magic formula on this show right now?
Ooh, Oh, go on then.
First of all, if you're going to write a book, it needs to be, it's got to be a magic book for the one person that you're writing it for. And that's the first tip, is that you always have to write for one person.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's only ever one person reading your book at a time, right?
Very true.
The magic formula is, first of all, that even if you have 1,000,000 readers, you're always writing to one person. And the magic formula is really simple. Your book, first of all, has to be, the end stands for it has to be marketable. So it has to set the agenda to embed you as the solution to somebody's problem, so that you as an author and what you do becomes a marketable thing that will help you build your brand, get your message out, or build your business.
Mm.
You know, if you're writing a non-fiction book, it's different, because then it just might be getting your creative streak out.
Yeah.
And in a marketable book, you can still get your creative streak out there, that's not a problem, but you need to think about the marketability of it and how you're going to use it to enhance your business, enhance your brand, or get you out there. So that's the first thing. I always look at marketability.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing, the A in the magic, stands for your book needs to attract and be designed to attract the right people. Before you start writing, you as an author, if you get really clear about exactly who you're writing for, what you're trying to help them with, and why you're doing it, your book will resonate with the right people. Because you don't need to attract everybody. You only need to attract the people who are going to resonate with you. So you can be yourself as an author, although it's great to have a formula and a step-by-step system. I think it's essential, in fact, that you come at it in a structured way. You still need your own authenticity to shine through, otherwise you won't attract the right people to your business or to you. And it's quite, there's a few simple things. You know, you've got to have a super relevant title to attract the right people. You've got to have a great subtitle so that people know on the front cover what the book's about. So for example, with mine, my title is Money Bondage, so you know it's about money. The bondage gives you a bit of curiosity about what it's about.
Yeah.
But the subtitle is Discover the Power of Mind Over Money. So you know it's a money mindset book, and you know it's going to help you do something, which is develop your own inner power, and it's going to help your money. So that title and subtitle is very powerful in attracting the right prospects. And also, at some point, you need to link back to your products and services and have a sales funnel ready for that. So the third step, the G in the magic formula, is inside your book, it's your job to give the gift of guidance to your reader. You always have to keep in mind the fact that somebody, by picking up a book, if it's not a non-fiction book, somebody's effectively coming to you for help.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to guide that person and give them the help, fulfill the promise that you make on the front cover of the book. And, you know, I do something with my clients about finding something I call their author archetype, which is finding a style and a way of writing and gathering your thoughts or your information together that means that you fall into your flow, find your flow as a writer really easily. Because if you pick the wrong style and you start writing in one style and it doesn't resonate with you, you really struggle to get your book out. And you'll stop and start and you'll put it down and you'll get blank page syndrome and all that stuff. So if you're going to guide your reader, you have to be very in your own flow to do a good job. And there's a way of doing that, you know, to guide people well, you have to know how to chunk your ideas, you know how to get your key points out, sequence chunks of information, write in the right author voice that suits you. So there's all sorts of parts to that, doing that gift of guidance piece that can make your book really powerful. Do you want to know the I?
Go on then.
Okay.
I'm writing this down and underlining each letter.
You have to inspire your readers.
Okay.
Because ultimately, you can guide people, but if you don't inspire them,
Yeah.
you won't help them make the change that they picked the book up for in the first place.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a science to inspiring people, bizarrely. You know, if you think of all the best movies, they have a certain, again, this back to this thing of rhythm. They have a rhythm to them. And you know there's going to be a cliffhanger, and you know there's going to be a resolution. You just don't know what it is. So there's a structure to writing a really great book. And if you think like a movie maker and think like a plot line, and yes, you can do that even in a business book. You can do it through storytelling. You can weave your magic that way. You can use verbal repetition. You can write in a way. I teach people to write to elicit a particular emotional state in their readers, so that you can, yes, I'll use the word manipulate, because if you can't manipulate somebody's emotions and take them on an emotional journey, they won't stay with you. They won't be inspired.
No, that's
so
true.
Inspiring is all about understanding the structure. You don't need to do it at a deep level, but understanding how stories and why stories are so powerful, and how you can apply them in your writing. Even that's just a little micro story. They might only be a paragraph long. If you think of the best adverts on TV, the ones that, you know, occasionally 2 or 3 times a year there'll be an advert that grips everybody's imagination and everybody's talking about, that's, some of them are done as plot lines, and
Yeah.
they're basically 30-second stories, aren't they?
They are. Absolutely.
You know, and there's a structure to those, and when you understand that, you can write in these little micro stories that keep people fascinated.
Yeah.
And there's ways of using sort of universal experiences that we all have and imprinting that as a writing style as well. That's another inspiration tip. I mean, we're only taking about 2 cards out of each deck here, but just to give you some quick tips that people, if they're writing a book right now or thinking of writing one, can apply.
Yeah.
And then the final thing, the C in the magic formula, is that you have to get your book complete. Now that's easier said than done, because it's very easy to start a book, and it's not so easy to finish it.
I know that one well.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's about having a good plan right at the beginning.
Yeah.
But to complete your book, you need a great cover design. You need to know how to format it, or get it formatted, where to go to get that done. You have to be able to get it edited and polished and proofread cost effectively, and by somebody who you can trust. And then you have to find your way through the maze that's printing and publishing, whether that be an ebook or physical books. And, you know, everybody writes a book for different reasons, but one of the things I've found with successful authors, even if they're only successful in a very niche field, so only a handful of people might know about them, but if they're the 5 most important people for your industry, they could be the only people that need to know about this. That sort of circles back to the marketing piece at the beginning, because I always work with people to make sure that they know who they're targeting with their book, whose attention they're trying to get. But yeah, you have to complete it. So that's sort of wrapping it up, really, getting the job finished, getting your book out there, and knowing how to use it effectively so that it does what you set out to do. It builds your brand, whether it just helps people who might be isolated in a problem. You know, they could be, you can reach somebody in Alaska with a book that you couldn't reach networking if you're living in Scotland, for example, or you've got worldwide reach. And maybe you just want to write a book and give it away. Maybe you just want to use a book so that it's a free download on Kindle that you can send all your prospects to. They can find out more about you. You know, there's so many different ways to use a book. And once it's complete, you can use that content in so many different formats. You can use the content in blog posts. You can use it as articles on LinkedIn. You can use it, the structure of how you think about your solution in radio interviews like this one, like my book writer's magic formula, right? You know, you can repurpose that, because here's the thing about a great book, is that once you have ordered and structured your own thinking, everybody else has the ability to access it.
Yeah.
And there's so many fantastic, wonderful experts and consultants and coaches and sales trainers and business leaders who it's not until they publish their first book that they really get their own head clear about what makes them different. Because that's the first time often that gifted people actually have to look at their own processes from the outside.
Yeah.
It can be so revealing.
Do you know what?
Because
I can
especially
see how that happens. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you?
I can,
I
yeah.
get that. You see, most people, it's one of the main principles of NLP is that if you do NLP, you sort of don't get it, because NLP started off just as the study of natural excellence. What was it that gifted people in a certain sector did? How did they structure what they did? What was the pattern to their thinking, their behavior, how they expressed themselves, what drove them, what was the metastructure behind that? And when you write a book, you have to look at your own excellence. So you have to work out what it is that you don't do, what it is that you leave out. What's the sequence of how you go about doing things? What do you think of first? What do you think of second? And so on. And what's your own feedback loops? And for most gifted people, they don't realize what their gift is until somebody else points it out to them. Now, once you start writing a book, you have to become more self-aware. And what's one of the biggest qualities of successful people? They're really self-aware, right?
They are very.
They have their own feedback loops. They give a speech and they hear themselves, they watch their own performance.
Yeah.
And then they replay it in their heads, and then they know what they can do better before they've even left the stage.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the same whether you're a sports person. You have that ability. If you're in sport, you have the ability to slow time down as you're performing.
Yes.
All the best people, that's one of the findings of NLP, the early findings were that gifted tennis players, for example, or baseball players, anything with a ball-based sport, actually see the ball coming to them more slowly than everybody else.
Yeah.
They literally slow down time in their own minds, and the ball is bigger. They're very self-aware. They've learned, and they have a natural aptitude to manage their vision and their brain in a certain way. But it's not what they thought they did. It was only elicitation that brought that out. They didn't know that they slowed it down until people asked them that question.
Yeah.
And that's what happens through the course of writing a great book. Some people can bring it out very naturally, but other people need some help to help them elicit that structure of what it is that they do, or maybe they do know what they do in a structure, but they don't have the writing skills to articulate it through a book. So there's sort of two elements to it. You can either, if you do it on your own, that's where people get themselves in a model, get themselves in a state, because they can either elicit what they do or elicit their story, but don't have the technical skills yet to be able to structure it in a reader-friendly way, or they have the structure, but they don't know how to bring out their own gift.
I've got you.
That's why it's a difficult challenge to do it on their own. And for some people, I only do this for 2 or 3 people a year, people who are really busy and really successful already in their field, and a book is the next phase for them, where they've done great without a book. They've got multi-million-pound businesses, national or international exposure already, companies 100 people or more, and these guys have not got time, and they don't want to sit down for 2 or 3 months and write a great book, but they feel compelled to either take their brand to the next level. I've got one client, for example, who has already built a business and has over £500 million worth of other people's money under management, and is starting to get some exposure in the national trade press in his specialist area, but hasn't had national or international exposure in national media yet. Now, because what he does is very specialist, having a book on the table gives him something to talk to Sunday Times journalists about, get him on the breakfast TV sofas. It's a brand building exercise that actually gives him chance to say what the values are that drives his company.
Yeah.
And the company culture. Now that in itself, it won't attract clients in a traditional coaching way, but what it will do is start to tell people what his business really stands for, and that's the next phase for him.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's not involved in his day-to-day business. So for people like that, I do some ghostwriting.
Yeah.
I take the thoughts out of people's heads and I say, okay, what message is trying to get across? You know, we look at that magic formula. What marketability do you want from this?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what are you trying to draw in? How are you trying to get out there? What's the vision you want to give to the world? What do you want to share with people? Who do you want to attract? So we'll make sure the title and the format and the form attracts the people that you would be interested in communicating with or attracting to your business. What's the gift of guidance that you want to give to people? So what's the core message? What are your key points? Let's get all your key points, let's get them in order and sequence. How are we going to inspire people? As the ghostwriter, that's sort of down to me on that one. So I'll think of the plot lines and the stories and sort of storyboard out the movie script, if you like, so we can slot their guidance into it. And then I take control of so they don't have to worry about the cover design and the printing and all that sort of, the mechanics of it. So whether you sit down and just use the magic formula for yourself and do it in isolation and just use the structure to work through, it will help.
Yeah.
Whether you want to be coached to have somebody to help elicit that the gift that's inside you, or help you with the technical writing structural side of it and the publishing and all that sort of thing, or whether you're a ghostwriter, whichever direction you come at it from, that magic formula is very powerful. And I hope your listeners have been taking notes if they want to write a book, because it works.
Yeah, do you know what? I'm on to my 3rd page so far. I love it.
I just have a passion for this stuff. I'm surrounded by books. I just love them, and because I've done everything up until the last couple of years on a shoestring, it makes you very resourceful.
Yeah.
And the best resources out there are really cheap.
Yeah.
They're just called books.
Yeah.
And for you can learn so much. And all the leaders that I've met, this is how the whole book thing came about, really. How if you like, it's the centre of my universe these days, was because I had last year had a really spooky 4 days where I met with people, and I was invited to go to not present. These were just informal meetings. Come to my office, let's have a coffee. I don't know what this is going to be about, but I just feel the need to connect with you. But these were people with massive businesses, Helen. I had an hour in the car with, and then dinner with Brian Tracy, for example, all because of the book.
Wow.
And I met these 3 business leaders in a row. And on day 4, I thought to myself, how, I'm not trying to sell anything here. How am I getting these meetings? Because when I was a salesperson, I would have cut my right arm off for these meetings, and I couldn't have got them if I'd have tried. And I realized that every single one of those conversations had started about a book. And because we'd either read the same books or were interested in the knowledge, the type of knowledge that was in books, whether it was around business psychology, other people's successes, other business leaders' books, company culture, persuasion and influence, self-mastery, emotional intelligence, all these conversations had started around books. And because we both read either the same books or the same genre of books, we both had different ideas about what we'd read, and those conversations just took a life of their own.
Amazing, isn't it?
On the Saturday, what happened was, so Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I had these 4 conversations, and I had all these meetings lined up, which produced some incredible opportunities, by the way. And on the Saturday, I was running, I don't do do these anymore quite like this. I was running a one-day business growth seminar, and 2 or 3, we were talking about business processes as an example, and I said to people, raise your hand if you've read this particular book. So we had 30 small business owners in the room. Not a single hand went up. And then just before lunch, we were talking about the psychology of influence, and I said, raise your hand if you've ever read this particular book. Not a single hand went up. And in the afternoon, there was another question around selling, and not a single hand went up. And I thought, do you know, when I talk to these people who are really successful, they've all read these books.
All read books, yeah.
Now, but they'd read those books specifically, and I thought, hang on, there's just an obvious difference. Small business owners struggling haven't read the books. Successful business owners have read the books.
Yeah.
And almost off the cuff, I said to the room, do you know what, you guys, seminars are wonderful, and you need to keep mixing, and you need to keep networking, you need to keep doing all this stuff, you need to educate yourself. You already know that, you're in this room. However, you need to read more. Raise your hand if I started an entrepreneur's book club, if you'd join it. Every single hand in the room went up.
Wow.
The following week, I did a speech for about 350 in London, and I asked the same question. Almost every hand went up. And I thought, hang on a minute, I need to do something about this.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I've always been a writer, you know, I had journalist roots, as you know, so I was contributing to magazines when I was 16, 17, and getting paid for it. Writing's paid for everything I've ever done. I can write literally, Helen, until my eyes bleed. You know, I get on a roll, and I will sit there till 4 o'clock in the morning, completely engrossed, and look at the clock or see the sunrise and be horrified that I've done a night without sleep. It's not with you.
No.
I just get so in that groove. The same with reading a good book. And everything I've ever done has been around books.
Yeah.
I've got a best-selling book. I've been training business writers for nearly 20 years. Hang on a minute.
Yeah.
What am I doing helping people to grow their businesses around sales and marketing? I should be doing the book stuff.
Yeah.
So the Entrepreneurs Book Club is launching in the next few weeks, and I've got some amazing people lined up to do webinars. So some of those business leaders I was telling you about.
Yeah.
We're going to be sending the books out, those essential books that people didn't raise their hands to say they'd read, some classics and some new stuff as well, onto people's doormats. And then a month after the book comes out, there's going to be a webinar with some of these business leaders talking about how they've applied it, not the theory in the book, about how they've used it to grow their businesses.
Yeah.
So those online masterclasses, if you like, are built around the books, and there's a whole load of other stuff around the books. They're like a hub. So each quarter we're going to look at a book around self-mastery, a book around persuasion and influence, and a book about leadership. Because when you have leadership, when you have leadership and self-mastery, and you're able to persuade and influence people, whether that not just be customers but your team, when you can inspire people, you have all the ingredients to do something amazing.
Exactly. And the thing is, like, if you're in a corporate environment, you have access to lots of training and development around influencing skills, confidence skills, presentation, all of, managing conflict and things like that. But you're also given material which you have to read. In business, if you've never been in a corporate environment, then read books, because you need to know all these skills. You need to understand how they impact our success.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a unique chemistry of reading. One of the things I want to be able to help people to do is to help them prioritize their reading as well. So it's mixed in a way that one book fires off the next, if you like.
Yeah.
And one book might be a completely different topic, but there's a running theme that helps stack your knowledge and stack your understanding in a way that allows you to apply it in the real world,
Do
because
you know what, it's really
effectively that's what it's all
interesting.
about, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting you said that, because my eldest, who is going off to uni this year, um, he will buy a number of books in one go, and I look at him and I think, how on earth can you read 7 books in one go? You just can't do it. And then I thought, well, why have you got those different titles? Why? And he puts them in order, and he reads them in order. And yet they're by
Yeah,
very different people and things, but that's just really what you've just explained, is that they will have a natural follow-on.
yeah, and your own take on each book
Hmm.
is what adds to your own uniqueness. So
Yeah,
you as a human being will have read different materials, seen different things, and had different experiences to everybody else on the planet.
yeah.
So your interpretation, this is the wonderful thing about books. Every reader reads a different book.
Hmm.
They might in some way, they might technically be all reading the same book. You know, if I send a book out to my book club and 1,000 people all read the same book, they will all have 1,000 different experiences.
Yeah.
Because a well-written book invites you to open your own imagination and to fill in the blanks. That's what the best books should do. So as a writer, that's a great skill, but as a reader, it's where your own imagination starts to connect dots, because you won't just connect the dots that you read in that book. You'll take the concept from that paragraph of that book and relate it to something that happened to you 2 years ago or yesterday,
Hmm.
or something you know is going to be happening to you, or a book that you read last year, or somebody you met last month. So every single reader will have a completely unique experience. It's one of the wonderful things
Mm.
about books. Radio plays have a very similar effect,
That's
because
very
you
true.
can't see somebody on the screen. You have to create these pictures in your mind,
Yes.
and that's where the creativity comes from. Have you ever had a moment, and actually, you know, your listeners can play along with this, have you ever had a moment where you've been doing something completely unrelated to a task that you had to do or a challenge that you had at work? You know, you've been out for a walk, you've been in the bath, you've been something, and suddenly something's popped into your head, or you've been reading a book.
Yep.
Suddenly something's popped into your head, and it's the solution that you have been hunting around your mind for 4 months,
Hmm.
and suddenly, bingo, it's there in a flash. The
Definitely.
wonderful thing about books is, because you're constantly adding more points of view and a different perspective,
Hmm.
because you're listening to the writer's perspective, it suddenly starts to make new neural connections, literally. You start to give yourself greater cognitive ability,
Hmm.
because your brain's firing in unexpected directions. And that's where the creativity comes from, is you putting more dots into the mix so you can create new connections between the dots.
It's absolutely fascinating. It really is. So obviously you've got to where you are today. Tell us a little bit more about where you're going forward, and you know, how people can follow you.
Well, going forward, it's all about the books.
Yeah.
So launching very soon is going to be the Entrepreneurs Book Club.
Hmm.
I wanted to do that because one of the big frustrations for me as a business is that often the people I want to help are very early on in their journey, or they might be struggling right now, and so to do high value coaching isn't in their budget.
Hmm.
And the Entrepreneurs Book Club gives people an access point where they can be part of a community at a very, very low cost.
Hmm.
So that I'm so excited about, and we're just getting the back-end systems work, so all the book deliveries work as they should, and everybody's memberships get dealt with as they should. Everybody gets access to the webinars, and the guest list gets finalised for the first few months. So you can people can pre-register for that. You can pre-register to get your name and be involved in that launch conversation and get an invite to the launch party by just
Oh,
going to the website for that one, which is
yeah.
entrepreneursbookclub.co.uk.
I'm
Really
on there
simple.
now.
entrepreneursbookclub.co.uk. And you'll just see an
Fantastic.
opt-in box at this point, so I can keep you in touch with when launch is going to happen and when the big online party is going to be. And I'm going to try and do a live launch party in London for that. That would be great.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
On the book writing side, people, of course, can just go to my home website, which is just about to have a complete rejig to reflect the whole focus. But that's just sophiebennett.com. 2 N's, 2 T's. And people can email me if they want to contact me directly, sophie@sophiebennett.com, really simple. You can connect with me on Twitter at Sophie Bennett UK, Facebook, Sophie Bennett UK, LinkedIn, everything's Sophie Bennett UK. I'm easy to find. If you just put Sophie Bennett Money Bondage into Google, the first 3 pages on Google, every single one of them's me. So that's
so if you're not sure who I've been chatting to today, is Sophie Bennett.
Yes. So that works quite well. And I've got a course that I'm launching soon. If anybody wants to be involved in the beta test for the bigger program coming later in the year, which is an online program with live coaching and live Q&As and some one-to-one work with me as well for writing their business book. If you just register, there's a website again, it's just a holding page, pop your details in and I'll let you know if you want to be involved.
Okay.
On writingforcoaches.com. That's writingforcoaches.com. Now, you don't need to be a coach. You could be an expert or a business owner of any description. That's just a domain that we're using to park things for the time being. But if you just go on sophiebennett.com, you can go onto my list. You'll get information about all the launches and stuff. So, but if it's writing specifically, if it's the magic formula that you'd like to find out more about and how you apply that, go to Writing for Coaches. You're interested in the book club, Entrepreneurs Book Club. I'm everywhere.
Fantastic. You know what? I will be following you very closely.
Oh, there's some real exciting stuff cooking in this kitchen, Helen. It's been an amazing start to the year.
It's what a journey, and and I think everybody should take a look at your book, and obviously have a look at the Entrepreneurs Book Club as well, because it is. Reading is very important, whether you're 87 or 7, it doesn't matter. Reading is, I don't know what it does, but it just aids our imagination, aids our skills, our ways to connect things and think differently and, you name it.
Absolutely. And I think the community element of the book club is something I'm really passionate about, because being an entrepreneur can be a very lonely thing sometimes.
Yeah.
And just, being able to go into a private sort of, behind a fence group where everybody's, intellectually curious and ambitious, but everybody's at a different stage in their journey. I really want to encourage the community side of it, and that's what the live Q&As are about. It's to get people talking to each other about the real business issues that we're all facing. It's all very nice to be creative and inspirational, but there's some practical challenges out there to running a business, and I want to be able to work with people as a group in the community side of that. So
brilliant. Well, listen, thank you so much, Sophie. Listeners, as Sophie's already said, just pop in her name into Google and you will be able to find her. But just very quickly, the book club is Entrepreneurs Book Club.
.co.uk.
Thank you. My brain went blank then. So entrepreneursbookclub.co.uk. The beta part of learning more about the magic formula is writingforcoaches.com. Have I got those right?
You certainly have.
Fantastic. Well, listen, thank you so much. And maybe we need to have a chat in a couple of weeks and just sort of see where we're at with the launch of the club. What do you think?
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on the show, Helen.
You're welcome. It's been...
podcast is really inspirational, and you're doing a wonderful job connecting people out there. Thank you.
No, thank you so much for that. And also, thank you for my listeners for joining us today. You can catch up with Sophie's interview online, as well as all my other wonderful guests, www.thehelenwindershow.com. I'll speak to you all very soon. Bye for now.